Hey, welcome back to Pete's Behavioural Insights and Theories, aka Pete's Bits. Do you like a good deal? Because I love a good deal. But what does it really mean to be a good deal? And can companies use what looks like a good deal to trick us into spending more money? Of course, the answer is yes. Today I'm going to be talking to you about something called the Decoy Effect. It's a pricing strategy used by companies like Starbucks, Apple, and McDonald's to get you to spend more money on their products. So if you're excited to find out about the Decoy Effect, please can you do me a massive favor by hitting that big red subscribe button below this video and ringing that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of my future behavioral science content. Alright, thanks for doing that, and let's get on with the video. So a few weeks ago, my dad sends me this photo which he saw on Facebook, and he says, "Hey Pete, what effect is this?" And it's a picture of this man selling watermelons, which might seem a bit unremarkable at first, but I like this photo because it has a nice story that goes along with it. An old man was selling his watermelons. His price list reads, 1 for $3 and 3 for $10. A young man stopped by and bought 3 watermelons, one by one, paying $3 for each. As the young man was walking away, he turns around and says, "Hey old man, do you realize I just bought 3 watermelons for $9 instead of $10? Maybe business is not your thing." The old man smiled and mumbled to himself, "People are funny. Every time they buy 3 watermelons instead of 1, yet they keep trying to teach me how to do business." Now the old man here was right. He's using a pricing strategy which is used by those big companies I mentioned earlier, Starbucks, McDonald's, Apple, etc. So my dad asks me, what effect is this old man using? And it turns out he's using the decoy effect. And to explain why, you're gonna have to stick around to the end of the video after all of the explanations. Perhaps the most famous example of the decoy effect comes once again from Dan Ariely. Dan Ariely noticed this effect in the subscription plans available for The Economist magazine. This was the pricing structure of The Economist magazine. You could get a web-only subscription for $59, a print subscription for $125, or a print and web subscription also for $125. Seems suspicious. So Dan suspected that this could be the decoy effect at play, and then that print subscription for $125 was actually there to shift people's preferences. So he did an investigation. In the first group, he only showed people 2 options: the web subscription for $59 and the print and web subscription for $125. And this is what the preferences were. 68% of people preferred the cheaper web subscription, whereas only 32% wanted the print and web subscription for the full $125. But look what happens when we add that third option, the print-only subscription also for $125. In the second group, when there were 3 options, the preferences have switched. Now only 16% of people want the cheaper web subscription. Nobody wants the print-only subscription for $125, and now a whopping 84% of people are choosing the more expensive print and web subscription for $125. Now isn't this an interesting effect? Why would this third option that nobody wants affect people's preferences? It doesn't really make much sense. Imagine I was to give you these 3 options. You could have your web-only subscription for $59, you could have your web and print subscription for $125, or you could drink urine. Why would this third option that obviously nobody wants affect your preferences? You wouldn't think that the unwanted third option of drinking urine would affect your decision on whether you want web or web and print subscription. But when the third option is very similar to one of the other options but just a little bit worse, then it actually shifts our preferences. When we have a decoy which is slightly worse than the target not only looks more favorable than the decoy, but also more favorable than all of its competitors. Now a lot of successful companies understand this phenomenon, and so they use it in their own pricing strategies. Here's Apple's selection for the 13-inch MacBook Pro. Now imagine you're choosing between these 2 laptops. You have the cheaper $1,500 laptop with the slower processor and half the storage, or you can get the $2,000 laptop with the touch bar, the faster processor, and double the storage. Which one do you choose? It's actually pretty hard to compare the 2, right? There's so many variables and a huge price differential between the 2. In this scenario, I expect the preferences would either be 50-50 or even more people going for the cheaper $1,500 laptop because $500 is a lot of extra money to spend on a 13-inch laptop. However, Apple wants you to spend more money, so they don't just present these 2 options, they give you a third option. They give you this option in the middle. It has the touch bar, the touch ID, the faster processor, but it only has half the storage of the better one. So now when you're presented with these 3 options, For only $200 more, you can get all the extra features plus double the storage. This middle option is exactly the same as the more expensive option, except that it has worse storage. And as a result, this makes the more expensive laptop look preferable to the Decoy, but also preferable to the lower power $1,500 laptop. This middle offering is probably not very popular. It's there as a decoy. This effect also exists in Starbucks coffee. Which cup size do you go for? The tall or the grande? Perhaps most of us would be content with the size of the tall, and the extra money spent on the grande doesn't seem worth it. But by adding a venti, a far bigger, more expensive coffee, the grande suddenly seems far more appealing. Most of us don't need a venti unless you've had a particularly rough night. But by having this venti, this unpopular, larger option, suddenly the price jump from tall to grande doesn't seem so dramatic. And so you're much more likely to choose the bigger grande coffee. And now to an old favorite of mine to discuss, McDonald's. So I found this paper on the Decoy Effect called The Perceived Value of Value Meals. And I couldn't believe that it's only been cited 12 times because it's absolutely awesome as a paper. And it discusses how value meals at fast food restaurants are actually an unintentional decoy. The authors argue that by grouping these popular items together in a value meal, you then make buying the individual components a worse option. It's a slightly worse version of buying the better value meal, which therefore makes the value meal look more appealing not only than buying the individual components separately, but also more valuable than purchasing any smaller order of food from the fast food restaurant. By including a meal deal, you actually make the individual components the decoy. So maybe you're a business owner and you want to use the decoy effect in your pricing strategy. This is how you do it. So here's how to make a decoy with Pete's Bits. Step 1. To make a decoy, start with 2 options in the same category. Step 2. Decide which one you want more customers to buy. Presumably, that's the one which earns you a higher margin. Step 3 is make a third option that is just slightly worse than the preferred choice in one dimension. It could be a little bit more expensive for virtually the same thing. It could be significantly worse in just one key feature, but be otherwise exactly the same. The key is that it has to be worse in just one dimension. This will create what we call in psychology the asymmetric dominance effect. By making one feature slightly worse than your target, you make the target look better not only than the decoy, but also better than all of its competitive options in the same category. And it turns out the decoy effect even extends outside of pricing illusions. In an experiment assessing people's perception of attractiveness, there were 2 computer-generated faces, Tom and Jerry. Now in the first group, there was also a third option, a slightly uglier version of Jerry, and in the second group, there was a slightly uglier version of Tom. Now it turns out the decoy effect also applies to human attractiveness. When the participants were shown the lineup with a slightly uglier version of Jerry, Jerry is seen as more attractive, and when there was a lineup shown with a slightly uglier version of Tom, Tom is more attractive. So if you're trying to pick a good wingman, you want someone who looks pretty much the same as you, but just slightly uglier than you. And it turns out the decoy effect even plays into politics. Here's George Bush and Barack Obama. George Bush is of course a white Republican, Obama is a black Democrat. Now people really hated George Bush and his presidency, they really didn't like him. But what if we add a decoy? Dum dum dum! Now people hate George Bush, but people really hate Donald Trump. Now when you see this lineup of 3 presidents, you see that George Bush is basically the slightly less hated version of Donald Trump. They're both white Republicans, they're the same category. And so the polling has shown that since Donald Trump took office, George Bush's polling numbers have been steadily increasing ever since. And you could attribute this to a kind of political decoy effect. So finally we come back to the man with his watermelons. But before I explain how he is using the decoy effect, if you haven't yet subscribed, please can you subscribe, and if you enjoyed this video, please can you give it a thumbs up, I'd really appreciate it. So the man and his watermelons are actually very, very sneaky. You see, his price board looks like there's only 2 options, one for $3 or 3 for $10. But there's actually a third option in there which is hidden, and that's buying 3 individual watermelons for $3 each. Now can you spot which offer is the decoy? Of course it's the 3 for $10 option. By having this terrible option, the 3 for $10 watermelons, which nobody wants, he makes the idea of buying 3 watermelons for $9 seem more appealing. It's a worse version of that deal. The 3 for $10 is a worse version of the 3 for $9 deal, which therefore makes the 3 for $9 deal not only seem better than the 3 for $10 deal, but also better than just buying 1 watermelon for $3. And as a result, the old man has sold 2 extra watermelons per customer. Hey, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I have a link in the description to an article where I got a lot of the information for this video. It also tells you how you can defend yourself from companies trying to use the decoy effect to exploit your biases. So if you're interested in reading that, check out the article below. Next week we have a pretty spicy topic. It's the psychology of racism. So if you're interested in finding out about that, make sure you're subscribed and that you've rang that notification bell so that you don't miss out on that next video. Alright, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye.